The wind screamed across the frozen surface of Velrith 9 like a living thing that wanted to kill. Dr. Hana, Kim pressed her gloved hand against the window of her research station and watched the world turn white. She had seen bad weather before, but this was different. This was the kind of storm that erased everything. Her computer screen flickered once, twice, then went dark. The lights followed. The heating system made a horrible grinding noise and stopped. Hana stood in the sudden silence and felt the cold begin to creep into the room. She had maybe 3 hours before the temperature inside matched the temperature outside, -89 degrees, cold enough to freeze human blood in minutes. She pulled on every layer of clothing she owned, 2 thermal suits, a weather shell, boots rated for extreme cold, 3 pairs of gloves. Her emergency pack held nutrition bars, medical supplies, and a locator beacon that probably would not work in this storm. She checked her wrist display. The backup shelter was 12 kilometers north. 12 kilometers through a blizzard that could barely see her own hands in. Hana stepped outside and the wind hit her like a physical blow. Ice particles stung any exposed skin. Her goggles fogged immediately. She wiped them clear and started walking, leaning into the wind at a 45-degree angle just to stay upright. Each step was a fight. The snow was already knee-deep and getting deeper. 20 minutes into the walk, she saw the shape. At first, she thought it was a rock formation, some trick of the snow and shadows. Then it moved. Hana's blood went cold for reasons that had nothing to do with temperature. She knew that shape. Every human on Velrith 9 knew that shape. Velrathi, the apex predators of this frozen moon. 3 meters tall, covered in thick white and gray fur with claws like black knives and jaws strong enough to crush metal. They had killed 6 colonists in the past year. Standing orders were to avoid them at all costs. Shoot on sight if necessary. But this one was not moving much. It was lying on its side near what looked like a collapsed snow den. Hana's training fought with her survival instinct. She should run. She should get as far away as possible. Instead, she moved closer. The Velrathi was badly hurt. A massive piece of ice had fallen across its chest and back legs. Blood stained the snow beneath it. The creature's eyes opened as Hana approached, pale yellow eyes that tracked her movement with frightening intelligence. It made a low sound in its chest, something between a growl and a groan. Then Hana heard the other sounds, higher pitched, coming from the collapsed den. She moved around the injured Velrathi carefully, every muscle ready to run. The creature watched her but did not move. Could not move, she realized. It was pinned and dying. Inside the broken den, 7 small shapes huddled together. Cubs. Velrathi cubs, maybe 3 months old, covered in fluffy gray fur. Their bioluminescent markings flickered weakly under their fur. Little lines of blue and green light that were starting to fade. They were freezing to death. Hana stood in the screaming wind and faced an impossible choice. These were Velrathi. In a few months, they would be large enough to kill her. In a year, they would be apex predators. The smart thing, the safe thing, was to walk away. Let nature take its course. Save herself. She looked at the injured adult. Male, she thought. Probably the pack leader based on the scars and size. He was watching her with those intelligent eyes. Not with hunger. Not with aggression. With something that looked almost like pleading. The cubs were shivering so hard their little bodies shook. The smallest one was barely moving. Hana cursed in Korean. Then she got to work. Her emergency pack had a thermal blanket, the kind that reflected body heat. She spread it on the snow and began lifting cubs. They were heavier than she expected, maybe 40 kilograms each. They whimpered and tried to bite, but they were too cold and weak to do much damage. She wrapped them together in the blanket, creating a bundle of confused, frightened predator babies. The adult Velrathi made a sound. Hana looked at him and understood. He wanted to come too. She almost laughed. The creature probably weighed 300 kilograms. She weighed 60. There was no possible way, but she looked around anyway. Found pieces of the collapsed den, long strips of frozen material that the Velrathi used for building, strong and light. She could make a sled. It would be insane. She would probably die, but she was already committed to insane. It took 40 minutes to build something that would hold. The adult Velrathi watched the entire time, his breathing getting shallower. Hana worked fast, her fingers going numb despite the gloves. She arranged the sled next to him and started pushing. He understood and helped, using his front legs to drag himself onto the makeshift platform. It took everything they both had. Then she loaded the bundle of cubs next to him. They immediately crawled against their father's body, seeking warmth. The adult wrapped one massive arm around them, protective even while dying. Hana found a piece of building material long enough to use as a pull bar. She tied it to the front of the sled with every piece of cord she had. Then she grabbed the bar, leaned forward, and pulled. The sled did not move. She pulled harder, throwing her whole body weight into it. The sled scraped forward maybe 10 centimeters. Hana pulled again. Another 10 centimeters again. Again. The wind howled around her. The cold was seeping through every layer. Her muscles screamed. But the sled was moving. Slowly, painfully, but moving. Hana settled into a rhythm. Pull step, pull step. Do not think about the distance. Do not think about the cold. Do not think about the impossibility. Just pull step, pull step. Behind her on the sled, the adult Velrathi kept his yellow eyes open, watching this small, weak creature drag him and his entire family into a blizzard. He did not understand what humans were, but he was beginning to learn. Every 100 meters Hana fell. The wind knocked her down or her exhausted legs gave out. Each time she lay in the snow for a moment, telling herself she could rest. Just for a minute, just until her strength came back. Each time she heard the cubs whimpering. Each time she got back up. The 12 kilometers stretched ahead like an ocean. Hana pulled the sled into the white nothing and refused to stop. Because that was what humans did. They made impossible choices and then did impossible things to see them through, even if it killed them. 6 hours into the journey, Hana had fallen 17 times. Her body was beyond exhaustion. Every muscle felt like it was tearing. Her lungs burned from breathing frozen air. Frostbite had turned 2 of her fingers black under the gloves. She could not feel her feet anymore, which was probably better than feeling them. The sled weighed more than 300 kilograms. Add the makeshift construction, and it was probably closer to 400. Hana weighed 60 kilograms soaking wet. The math did not work. Physics said this was impossible. But Hana had stopped caring about physics somewhere around the 3rd kilometer. Pull step, pull step. The world had narrowed to just these 2 actions. Nothing else existed. Not the screaming wind. Not the cold eating through her layers. Not the very real possibility that she would die out here in the white nothing. Just pull step, pull step. She fell again. This time she did not get up right away. Her body simply refused. She lay face down in the snow, arms spread out, and felt the cold starting to wrap around her like a blanket. It would be so easy to just stay here. So easy to close her eyes and let the cold take her. No more pain. No more impossible burden. Behind her, the cubs started crying. It was a sound she had never heard before, high and mournful. It cut through the wind like a knife. The adult Velrathi made a sound too, deeper, more desperate. He was calling to her. She understood that much even without speaking his language. Hana tried to push herself up, but her arms gave out. She collapsed back into the snow. This was it then. She had tried. She had given everything, but it was not enough. Something moved on the sled. Through her fogged goggles, Hana saw the adult Velrathi forcing himself to move. His injuries screamed at him, but he ignored them. He dragged his massive body to the edge of the sled and then off it, landing in the snow with a sound like thunder. He should not be able to move. The ice had crushed his ribs, probably punctured a lung. But he was moving anyway. The Velrathi crawled to the front of the sled, each movement leaving a trail of blood in the snow. When he reached the pull bar, he grabbed it in his massive jaws. Then he began to pull. His back legs were useless, but his front legs still had strength. The sled moved forward maybe 2 meters before he collapsed. But in those 2 meters, Hana understood. This was not just her burden. They were in this together. The Velrathi had just spent what little strength he had left to show her that. She got up. Every part of her body protested, but she got up anyway. She stumbled to the Velrathi and helped him crawl back onto the sled. The cubs immediately pressed against him, their little bodies shaking with fear and cold. The adult looked at Hana with those yellow eyes. She saw understanding there, perhaps even respect. Hana grabbed the pull bar and started walking again. Pull step, pull step. But something had changed. She was not alone anymore. This was not just human stubbornness fighting against nature. This was 2 different species choosing to survive together. At the 8-kilometer mark, Hana started hallucinating. She saw her brother Minho walking beside her. He looked exactly like he had when she left Earth 3 years ago. Young, healthy, smiling. He told her to rest. Just for a minute. Told her she had done enough. Told her it was okay to stop. Hana told her hallucination to shut up and kept walking. At the 9-kilometer mark, her body began shutting down. She had burned through every calorie in her emergency rations. Her core temperature was dropping despite all the layers. Her vision kept going dark around the edges. She was dying slowly but definitely. The 10th kilometer was blank. Later, Hana would have no memory of it. Her body was moving on pure instinct. Muscle memory keeping her legs moving even after her brain had checked out. Pull step, pull step. An endless loop that might continue forever. She woke up lying in the snow. No memory of falling. No idea how long she had been down. The wind had gotten worse. Snow was already starting to cover her body. This was how it ended then, frozen solid in a blizzard on an alien moon, having failed to save anyone. Warmth touched her face. Hana's eyes flickered open. The adult Velrathi was lying next to her, his massive body curved around hers. His thick fur blocked the wind. His body heat, what little he had left, was radiating into her frozen form. He had dragged himself off the sled again, using the last of his strength not to save himself but to save her. The cubs had followed their father. They pressed in around Hana, 7 small bodies adding their warmth to the pile. They whimpered and made small chirping sounds. They licked her frozen face with rough tongues. They refused to let her die. Something broke inside Hana. Or maybe something came together. She had saved them and now they were saving her. They were pack. Species did not matter. Language did not matter. All that mattered was that pack survived together. She forced her body to move. The Velrathi helped her up, using his head to push her to her feet. The cubs bounced around her legs, encouraging her with their strange sounds. Together they got the adult back onto the sled. Together they arranged the cubs around him. Together they started moving again. The final 2 kilometers took 3 hours. Hana fell 12 more times. Each time the cubs cried until she got up. Each time the adult Velrathi watched her with those yellow eyes, willing her to continue. They had become something new out here in the blizzard. Not human and alien, not predator and prey, just survivors who refused to give up. When the emergency shelter finally appeared through the snow, Hana almost walked past it. Her brain was so focused on pull step, that it could not process anything else. One of the cubs barked and jumped off the sled, running to the shelter door. The others followed, excited. They had reached safety. Hana pulled the sled up to the entrance. The door was frozen shut. She kicked it, nothing, kicked again. The door cracked. She kicked with everything she had left. The door broke open. Getting the sled inside was the last impossible thing in a day full of impossible things. The door was barely wide enough. Hana had to push and pull and drag, while the Velrathi tried to help by shifting his weight. The cubs got underfoot, excited and scared. It took 20 minutes of desperate effort. Then they were inside. All of them. Hana sealed the door against the storm and turned on the thermal generator. Heat began to pump into the small space. The cubs immediately started exploring, sniffing everything, getting into supplies. The adult Velrathi lay on the floor, his breathing shallow and labored. His yellow eyes found Hana one more time. She saw gratitude there. She saw recognition. She saw the beginning of something that would change everything. Then she collapsed beside him and knew nothing more. Hana woke to the sound of chirping. For a confused moment she thought she was back on Earth, hearing birds outside her window. Then the memories came flooding back and she sat up fast, too fast. Her vision went dark and she nearly fell over. The cubs were scattered around the small shelter, investigating everything with endless curiosity. One was trying to eat her spare boots. Another had found her research tablet and was batting it across the floor like a toy. The smallest one, the one Hana thought of as Dari, was sitting right next to where she had collapsed, watching her with bright blue eyes. The adult Velrathi was still lying where he had been. His eyes were closed. For a horrible moment, Hana thought he was dead. Then she saw his chest rise and fall, shallow breathing but breathing. She crawled over to him on hands and knees. Her body screamed at her with every movement. Frostbite, exhaustion, probably hypothermia. But that could wait. The Velrathi was in worse shape. Much worse. Hana had veterinary training from her xenobiology studies. She knew Earth animals well and had studied some alien biology. But Velrathi were different. Their internal structure was similar to Earth mammals but not identical. She would have to guess and hope she guessed right. She started with diagnostics. Broken ribs, definitely. At least 4, maybe 6. Internal bleeding, probably. His back legs were not responding to stimulus. Spinal damage or just severe trauma, she could not tell. His breathing was labored and wet-sounding. Punctured lung. His body temperature was too low even for a cold-adapted species. Hana looked at her medical supplies. Designed for humans. She had pain medication, antibiotics, wound sealant, a basic surgical kit. Nothing rated for a 300-kilogram apex predator. She would have to improvise. The cubs gathered around as she worked. They seemed to understand that their father needed help. They stayed quiet, which she guessed was unusual for young predators. Dari pressed against Hana's leg, offering silent support. First, she addressed the hypothermia. She wrapped the Velrathi in every thermal blanket she had and set up a portable heater next to him. His thick fur was good insulation, but he had lost too much heat during the journey. The cubs piled on top of their father, adding their body heat. Next, the internal bleeding. This was the dangerous part. Hana gave him a dose of human pain medication, quadrupling it based on body weight and hoping it would not poison him. Then she used her diagnostic scanner to find the worst of the internal damage. One rib had punctured something important. She could not operate properly without real equipment, but she could inject wound sealant directly into the area and hope his body did the rest. The Velrathi's eyes opened when she inserted the long needle. He looked at her and made a low sound. Not aggressive. Questioning. Hana met his yellow gaze and spoke in Korean, knowing he could not understand the words but hoping he understood the tone. I am trying to help. This will hurt, but it might save your life. Please do not eat me. His eyes seemed to soften. He closed them again and stayed still while she worked. The procedure took 4 hours. By the end, Hana's hands were shaking from exhaustion and stress. She had used half her medical supplies and done things that would make her professors scream, but the Velrathi was still breathing. Breathing better, actually. The wet sound in his chest was gone. She collapsed against the wall and only then realized the cubs were hungry. Very hungry. They were chewing on things they should not chew on and making desperate little sounds. Hana's food supplies were meant for 1 human for 2 weeks. She had 7 predator cubs and 1 adult predator. The math was terrible, but she had protein paste, lots of it, designed for human consumption, but it was pure nutrition. She squeezed some into a bowl and the cubs swarmed it. They ate like they were starving, which they probably were. Dari ate the least, staying close to Hana instead of fighting for food. The smallest cub, always the gentlest. Over the next 3 days, Hana fell into a routine. Keep the fire burning, feed the cubs, monitor the adult Velrathi, who she started thinking of as Kale, though she had no idea if that was appropriate. Change his bandages, give him medication, hope he survived. The cubs treated her like pack. They followed her everywhere. They brought her things, mostly random objects they found interesting. Rocks, pieces of equipment, her own socks. She learned their personalities. 3 were bold and aggressive. 2 were cautious and clever. 1 was food-obsessed. And Dari was gentle and constantly seeking affection. On the 4th day, Kale opened his eyes and they were clear, focused. He looked around the shelter, taking in his cubs playing, taking in Hana working at her equipment. His gaze settled on her and stayed there. Hana felt like she was being evaluated, judged. She met his stare and refused to look away. After a long moment, Kale made a sound, low and rumbling. The cubs immediately stopped playing and ran to him. They piled on top of him, licking his face, crying with joy. He was really awake now, really going to survive. Kale's eyes found Hana again. Slowly, carefully, he extended 1 massive paw toward her. The movement clearly caused him pain, but he did it anyway. His paw, tipped with those obsidian claws that could tear through metal, reached across the small space. Hana understood this was important. Some kind of gesture, maybe a test. She reached out and placed her small hand on his paw. His fur was soft and warm. His paw was so large her hand looked like a child's in comparison. They stayed like that for several seconds. Human and Velrathi, 2 species that were supposed to be enemies. Connected by something deeper than language or biology. Connected by the simple fact that she had saved his family and he knew it. Kyle made another sound, different from the others. Softer. The cubs gathered around both of them, chirping happily. Dari crawled into Hana's lap and looked up at her with complete trust. On the 5th day, Kyle tried to stand. It was too soon and Hana tried to stop him, but he was determined. He got his front legs under him and pushed up. His back legs trembled but held. He stood there swaying for maybe 10 seconds before carefully lying back down. But he had stood. He was healing. That night, Hana's long-range communicator crackled to life. After 2 weeks of silence, contact with the outside world. A voice came through speaking Korean. Emergency Shelter 7, this is Rescue Team Beta. We are en route to your position. Ada, 72 hours. Respond if you can hear this. Hana stared at the communicator. She should feel relief. Rescue was coming. She would live. But all she felt was cold dread spreading through her chest. Because rescue also meant the military. And the military had orders regarding Velrathi. Orders that said they were hostile threats to be eliminated on sight. If she told them about Kale and the cubs, they would come armed. They would kill them all. Kyle watched her from across the shelter. His yellow eyes were intelligent and knowing. Somehow he understood. Danger was coming. Hana looked at the cubs playing, at Dari sleeping peacefully in her lap, at Kyle who had used his dying strength to save her in the blizzard. She looked at the family she had dragged through hell to rescue. Then she made another impossible choice. Hana spoke into the communicator with a voice she forced to sound weak and grateful. Rescue Team Beta, this is Dr. Kim, I copy. I am alive, alone. Supplies are low, but I can hold out for 3 more days. The voice on the other end sounded relieved. Understood, Dr. Kim, stay put. We are bringing medical support and full extraction. Did you encounter any Velrathi during the storm? Hana looked directly at Kale as she answered. Negative. I stayed sealed in the shelter the entire time. Saw nothing outside. Good. Command has concerns about increased Velrathi activity in your region. We are coming armed and will do a full sweep of the area. Standard protocol. Her stomach dropped. A sweep? Is that necessary? I just want to go home. Protocol, Doctor. Several colonists were killed during the storm. Command thinks the Velrathi are getting bolder. We need to make sure the area is secure before we can evacuate you. After the communication ended, Hana sat in silence. 72 hours. 3 days to figure out how to save Kale and his cubs from trained soldiers with orders to kill on sight. Kale made a low sound. He was standing now, still shaky but mobile. He moved to his cubs and began organizing them with sounds and gentle pushes. Hana watched as the cubs lined up, suddenly serious. Kyle was preparing them to leave. Dari whimpered and pressed against Hana's leg. The smallest cub did not want to go. Kyle made a sharp sound and Dari reluctantly joined the others, looking back at Hana with heartbroken eyes. Hana's mind raced. She could not let them just leave. The military would track them, find them, kill them, but she also could not hide 7 large predators and 1 massive adult in a small shelter. The soldiers would search everything. She grabbed her research tablet and started drawing. Simple pictures. A stick figure human, 7 small Velrathi shapes, 1 large one. She drew them together, then drew them apart. Drew the shelter, then drew the canyon system 3 kilometers east. Drew the human soldiers with weapons. Kale watched her draw. His yellow eyes tracked every line. When she finished, she looked up at him and waited, hoping he understood, hoping he was as intelligent as she thought. Kale studied the tablet for a long moment. Then he used 1 claw to point at the drawing of himself and the cubs in the canyons. He pointed at the drawing of Hana in the shelter. He understood. They would hide while she faced the soldiers alone. But then he did something unexpected. Kale pointed at the drawing of the soldiers approaching. Then he pointed at himself. Then at Hana, the meaning was clear. He wanted to stay close. To protect her, Hana shook her head. She erased the soldiers and drew new ones, lots of them with bigger weapons. She drew the Velrathi falling down. Dead. Kale had to understand the danger. This was not a fight he could win. Kyle looked at the new drawing. He made a thoughtful sound. Then he took the stylus in his mouth, awkward but determined. He drew something new. A Velrathi shape in the shadows. Watching, not fighting, just watching. He drew a line from that shape to the human soldiers, then drew their equipment breaking. Hana stared at the drawing and slowly smiled. Kale was not suggesting a fight. He was suggesting sabotage. He would stay hidden but close. If the soldiers threatened her, he would cause problems. Quiet problems. Distracting problems, she nodded. It was still dangerous, but it was a plan. Over the next 2 days, they prepared. Kyle practiced moving silently despite his size. The cubs learned to stay absolutely quiet on command. Hana cleaned the shelter of any evidence that Velrathi had been there. She collected fur from the floor, scrubbed blood from the walls, reorganized supplies to hide how much food had been consumed. On the final night before the soldiers arrived, Kale did something that Hana would remember for the rest of her life. He approached her slowly, limping but strong. The cubs gathered around both of them, watching with solemn eyes. Kyle lowered his massive head and gently took Hana's hand in his jaws. Not biting, just holding. His teeth, each one capable of tearing through steel, rested against her skin with impossible gentleness. He held her hand like that for several heartbeats while the cubs made soft humming sounds. Then he released her and touched his forehead to hers. The gesture was so tender, so deliberate that Hana felt tears forming. This was a ritual. She did not know the details, but she understood the meaning. Kale had claimed her as pack. She was under his protection now. A debt that could never be repaid. The cubs came forward one by one. Each touched their small heads to her hand. Each made the humming sound. Even Dari, who pressed against her one last time before following the others. They were saying goodbye, but also something more. Something like, "We will not forget." At dawn, Kale led his cubs out of the shelter. They vanished into the landscape like ghosts, leaving no tracks in the fresh snow. Hana sealed the door and began the hardest wait of her life. The rescue team arrived exactly on schedule. 3 transport vehicles, 12 soldiers, 2 medical personnel, and Captain Ji-hoon Park, a man with sharp eyes and a reputation for following rules exactly. "Dr. Kim, it is good to see you alive," he said as Hana stumbled out of the shelter, genuinely exhausted and cold. "Your survival is remarkable. Tell us what happened." She told the story she had practiced. The storm, the shelter failure, the desperate wait for rescue. She was a good liar because most of it was true. She just left out the part about the Velrathi family. The medical team examined her. Frostbite, malnutrition, exhaustion. Everything consistent with her story. They wanted to evacuate her immediately, but Captain Park insisted on the security sweep first. "Protocol," he said. "We have to make sure the area is safe." Lieutenant Yoonji Choi, the team's security specialist, was already examining the shelter. She was thorough. Too thorough. She found a piece of fur Hana had missed. Held it up to the light. "Captain, we have Velrathi presence confirmed." "This fur is recent." Hana's heart stopped. She forced herself to look confused. "Maybe it blew in when I opened the door." "They are in the area, right?" Yoonji was not convinced. "This was inside your supply cabinet, Doctor. And there are claw marks on the floor." "Very fresh." Captain Park's expression hardened. "Lieutenant, organize a perimeter search. Full thermal scans. If there are Velrathi in this area, I want them found." The soldiers spread out with military efficiency. Hana watched them go and felt sick. They would find tracks eventually. Find the canyons where Kale was hiding. Find his cubs. Kill them all! Then the problem started. First, 2 transport vehicles would not start. Mechanical failure in both simultaneously. The soldiers worked on them for an hour, while Captain Park grew increasingly frustrated. Then the thermal scanners malfunctioned. All of them, at the same time. The soldiers could not figure out why. The equipment was new and had tested fine before landing. Then the supply crates mysteriously opened during the night. Food scattered everywhere. In the morning, Lieutenant Yoonji found massive paw prints in the snow around the camp. Velrathi prints, but they led nowhere. They just appeared and disappeared. Captain Park called off the perimeter search after the 3rd day. "Too many equipment failures, too many problems. We are evacuating immediately," he ordered. "This area is clearly unstable. We will send a proper military team later." Hana said nothing. She just looked toward the canyons where she knew Kale was watching, where he had spent 3 days sabotaging the rescue operation without ever being seen, protecting her even when it put him at risk. As the transport lifted off, she caught a glimpse of bioluminescent markings in the distance. 7 small shapes and 1 large one, watching her leave, guarding her until she was safe. 6 months passed before Hana saw Earth again. 6 months of debriefings, medical evaluations, and endless questions about her survival. She told her story so many times it began to feel like something that happened to someone else. The officials praised her resilience. The media called her a miracle. Nobody knew the truth. She stood in front of 300 scientists at the Xenobiology Institute in Seoul and gave a presentation that would change her life. The title was simple: Reconsidering Velrathi, evidence for sapient behavior and potential for coexistence. The room was skeptical before she even began. Velrathi were known threats, killers. 11 colonists dead in the past 2 years. Standing protocol was termination on site. What could one xenobiologist possibly say to change that? Hana started with biology, showed brain scans that indicated advanced cognitive function, showed evidence of complex social structures, tool use, possibly even language. The audience listened but remained unconvinced. Lots of predators were smart. That made them more dangerous, not less. Then she showed the behavioral studies. Velrathi mourned their dead, cared for injured pack members, showed strategic thinking and problem-solving abilities that rivaled human intelligence. One scientist in the back raised her hand. Dr. Kim, with respect, everything you are describing makes them sound like more efficient killers. Why would we want to coexist with that? Hana looked at the woman and chose her next words carefully. Because they can choose not to kill. Because they understand concepts like debt and honor. Because they are not animals. They are people. Different from us, but people. The room erupted in arguments. Half the scientists thought she was naive. The other half thought she was dangerous. Her presentation was supposed to last an hour, but the debate went for 3. In the end, nothing changed. The protocols stayed the same. Velrathi were still shoot on sight, but Hana had expected that. She had not given the presentation to change minds. She had given it to create a record. To put the truth out there officially so what came next would make sense. She requested reassignment to Velrith 9. Her superiors thought she was insane. You nearly died there, Doctor. Why would you want to go back? Unfinished research, she said. It was not a lie. She had research that would never be finished. Not from Earth, they argued. They tried to send her elsewhere. But Hana had survived the impossible. She had a reputation now. The woman who walked through a blizzard and lived. When she insisted, they finally agreed. One xenobiologist, one research station, full autonomy. They thought she would gather more data and prove them right about Velrathi. They had no idea what she was really planning. The new research station was built in the same region as her original shelter. Hana arrived alone, refusing the military escort. She spent the first day unpacking and setting up equipment. She spent the first night building a fire outside. The fire was visible for kilometers across the frozen landscape. Hana sat beside it, wrapped in thermal gear, and waited. She had no proof that Kale and his cubs had survived the past 6 months. No evidence they were even in this region anymore. This might be a fool's hope. But she had learned something about hope during that blizzard. Sometimes hope was all you needed. The stars came out. The temperature dropped to -70. The fire crackled and sent sparks into the dark sky. Hana fed it and waited. Movement in the shadows. 7 shapes, each the size of a human now. Not cubs anymore. Young adults, fast and deadly, with glowing bioluminescent markings under their fur. They approached cautiously, circling the fire at a distance. Then one broke from the pack and ran forward. Smaller than the others, more delicate. Dari crashed into Hana with enough force to knock her over. The young Velrathi made crying sounds and licked Hana's face with a rough tongue, beside herself with joy. The other 6 approached more carefully. They had grown so much, become so strong, but they remembered. Each one touched their head to Hana's hand, making that soft humming sound. Greeting her, welcoming her home. Then the 8th shape appeared, massive and scarred, moving with a slight limp that would probably never fully heal. Kale approached the fire, and the sight of him made Hana's eyes water. He had survived, grown stronger, led his cubs into adulthood. Kale stopped in front of Hana and looked at her with those yellow eyes. 6 months apart, but the recognition was immediate and absolute. He lowered his head and she placed her hand on his fur. No words needed, no translation required. I came back, she said in Korean, knowing he could not understand the words but hoping he understood the meaning. I promised I would come back. Kyle made a sound deep in his chest. Then he settled beside the fire and his pack settled around him. 7 young adults and 1 human, gathered in a circle of firelight on a frozen moon. Over the next weeks, other humans observed from orbit. They saw Dr. Kim working outside her station while Velrathi moved freely around her. They saw her sitting among them, taking notes, seemingly unafraid. Reports went back to command with increasing alarm. Captain Ji-hoon Park was sent to investigate. He arrived with a small security team, weapons ready. Hana met them at the landing site with Dari at her side. The young Velrathi was nearly as tall as Hana now, A perfect killing machine. She stood close to Hana and watched the soldiers with bright blue eyes. "Dr. Kim, step away from that creature," Captain Park ordered. "No," Hana said simply. "That is an order, Doctor. That thing is dangerous." "Her name is Dari. She has been living with me for 3 weeks. She is not dangerous unless you make her dangerous." The soldiers raised their weapons. Dari growled, low and threatening. The other 6 Velrothi appeared from the shadows surrounding the group. Kyle came last, moving to stand directly beside Hana. The message was clear. To get to her, they would have to go through the entire pack. Captain Park's finger hovered near the trigger. One word from him and this would become a bloodbath. Hana stepped forward, positioning herself between the soldiers and the Velrothi. 5 months ago you asked me what happened during that storm. I lied to you. I survived because of them. Because Kale here shared his body heat when I was freezing. Because these cubs refused to let me give up. Because they are not mindless predators. They are people. Dr. Kim, you are emotionally compromised. Step aside. No, you will have to shoot me first. And if you do, Kale will tear you apart before you can reload. Not because he is a monster. Because I am his pack. Because he honors debts. Because that is what people do. The standoff lasted for almost a minute. Then Captain Park slowly lowered his weapon. His team followed his lead. He looked at Kale, really looked at him, and perhaps saw something he had not expected to see. Intelligence, purpose, choice. "This will be reported to command," he said quietly. "I am counting on it," Hana replied. The security team left. The reports went up the chain of command. Arguments erupted across the colonial government. But Hana stayed in her research station with her pack around her, and nobody came to force her out. 5 years later, the first human Velrothi treaty was signed. The location was Hana's research station. Representatives from both species attended, though the Velrothi delegation consisted only of Kale and his now-grown cubs. Dari stood beside Hana throughout the ceremony, proud and protective. The treaty was simple. Designated territories for both species, mutual non-aggression, cooperation on research and survival. It was not perfect, but it was a beginning. That night, after the diplomats and cameras left, Hana sat by her fire one more time. Kale settled beside her, gray around his muzzle now, the years and old wounds catching up to him. His pack sprawled around them. 7 adult Velrothi who had grown from frightened cubs into magnificent hunters. Dari rested her head in Hana's lap and made a contented sound. The smallest cub, now a powerful adult, still chose gentleness when given the choice. Hana looked up at the stars and thought about that day in the blizzard. The impossible choice, the endless pulling, the moment when she decided that saving lives mattered more than following protocols. She had no idea then that she was not just saving one family. She was building a bridge between species. Kale made a sound, deep and peaceful. His yellow eyes reflected the firelight. He was old now, would not live many more years. But his legacy was secure. His cubs knew that humans could be pack, would teach their cubs the same lesson, would remember the small woman who dragged them through a storm. Somewhere in the settlement, human children played with young Velrothi cubs under watchful eyes. Somewhere in the labs, scientists from both species worked side by side. Somewhere in the government chambers, leaders debated the future of coexistence. All of it traced back to this fire, to this pack. To the moment when a human woman made an impossible choice and a Velrothi leader chose to trust her. The fire crackled. The pack slept around her, and Hana understood that she had found what every explorer secretly hopes to find, not just new worlds or new species, but connection, proof that across the vast emptiness of space between wildly different forms of life, understanding was possible. Trust was possible. Family was possible. She had carried 7 cubs through a blizzard. In return, Kale guarded her fire, and in that simple exchange, 2 species learned that they did not have to be enemies, that maybe, just maybe, the universe was big enough for all of them.